Hey everyone, Cody Hayes here, and I'd like to welcome you to Philosophy 105, Introduction to Ethics. And essentially what I'm wanting to do here is just provide a brief introduction of what we're going to be covering this semester, so there's not anything that you need to write down. Should we seek the greatest amount of good for the greatest number, or should we fulfill our duty? Essentially what we are looking at here is utilitarian ethics versus Kantian ethics or deontology ethics. And of course, within utilitarianism, the principle is that you seek the greatest amount of good for the greatest number. Kantian ethics, the notion is that you fulfill your duty, that you have certain duties that you must fulfill, and you need to fulfill them no matter what. And if someone is hurt in the process of you fulfilling them, that's not your problem, because they're out of your hands at that point. You have done your duty, and that's what you needed to do. What can stories teach us about ethics? What can parables? What can myths? What can fairy tales teach us about what makes an action right, what makes an action wrong, or about values? Lots of statements here. Is there nothing truly right and wrong? A moral nihilism. Does an individual decide what is right and wrong? In this case, individual relativity, that what I might find to be right and wrong, you don't necessarily find to be right and wrong, and vice versa. Does a culture decide what is right and wrong? That, cultural relativity. When you're in Rome, act as the Romans do. When you're in America, act as the Americans do. That there's not a universal right and wrong. It is a culture that will decide what is right and wrong, and when you're in that culture, you follow their rules. Does a divine or heavenly being such as God decide what is right and wrong? That when God says do this, this is always right, and when God says do not do this, this is always wrong. Is there a universal right and wrong, regardless of what an individual, culture, or divine being may declare? That, essentially, it doesn't matter what you think, it doesn't matter what your culture thinks, and it doesn't matter what your particular divine being might think, that there is a right and there is a wrong regardless of those factors. Are we naturally self-centered? Or if we are not, should we be self-centered? The notion here with the first portion, are we naturally self-centered, this is what is known as psychological egoism, which teaches, of course, that we are self-centered, naturally self-centered. We are selfish. It's within our DNA. If we do what is considered a, quote, good act, we only did so because we feel bad if we did not. Or are we not naturally that way? But should we behave in a self-centered manner? That is to say, we could choose to look out for others. We could be altruistic, looking out for the other. But it's not in our best interest to do so. It's in our best interest to look out for ourselves. Is it permissible for an individual to be euthanized? That, essentially, if a person is suffering from severe pain of some kind and wants to end his or her life, should he or she have the right to do so in a humane manner? Are there certain situations where having an abortion is permissible? Of course, both here, euthanasia and abortion, relate to bioethics, life ethics. In the case with abortion, I have found those within the pro-life crowd that, of course, by definition are, against abortion, that if you were to ask them, well, what about this particular situation? Would that be a case where having an abortion would be the proper action? Many would say, okay, in that particular situation, yes. But then there are those that would respond, no, it doesn't matter what situation it is. Abortion is not acceptable. So one final note to mention here with learning about new concepts or ideas, and of course I have on the screen here Raphael's School of Athens, featuring Plato and his famous student Aristotle. Little quote here from Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher. "It is impossible to begin to learn that which one thinks one already knows." When it comes to learning about new concepts or ideas, an individual may have to acknowledge what he or she held previously was wrong. The last statement comes from a former student of mine. This particular individual, brilliant, still is brilliant, but I could tell with this person that this individual's intelligence was pretty much through a particular filter or lens. In this case, a particular religious lens and a particular political lens. And of course, in classes like this, we don't talk about, every concept or idea through that particular religious or political lens. And whenever this individual would hear, concepts or ideas that were outside, the lens, the filter that this person had been brought up in, this person would become very defensive. But I happened to encounter this individual sometime later, and, we were chatting, and this person, said to me, this person stated that, when it comes to learning about, new ideas, continuing in higher education in college, that, sometimes you just have to acknowledge that maybe you might be wrong. And that's a very good way to go about learning. As Epictetus would state, from the quote, "It's impossible to begin to learn that which one thinks one already knows." If you already know everything, how can you learn anything? What's the point of being in a class if you think you already know all the material? So, in any case, that's all with this particular introduction. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to send me a message in the Q&A forum or send me an email. Until then, take care.